this.
Alright guys, so this is more of a discussion about decks for the last I'm say 10 years. It's not more or less about a deck or format right now, but it's still relevant because decks have what I'm about to talk about. So, in the game, if you want deck consistency, there's two things. If you're playing like a deck that has an archetype, like say E-Heroes have emergency calls, stuff like that, cards that have their own archetype, or decks I mean. There are two things that Konami will make for the deck and will decide that is how it's going to get its consistency. It's more or less the other, but it has happened to be the other one too. So what that is what the title is draw power versus searching. So a lot of decks will either get a monster card or a spell card, or sometimes a trap, but a card that lets them search out key cards in the deck for that archetype. But other decks might not have a searcher, or they might have, most decks have multiple searchers. They'll have like a spell or a monster, but I'm just using a broad thing. They'll have at least one card that searches. But there are some decks that will have a card for draw power. And I'm not just talking about your generic draw power. I'm talking about that for the archetype, it'll have a draw power card. It's far and few between, but it'll have some type of effect of like, oh, you do this, draw one card or something. And that is the way that you gain your consistency to make your plays. Now, the discussion here is now what is better, searching or draw power? Now, right off the bat, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking searching is way better off the bat because you can take the cards that you need and you're done. But I've also noticed that a lot of these decks, not always, but a lot of them will have parameters that you can pick. You can only pick a certain type of card to search for. And yes, that card can maybe build off a play after that, but there's only a certain type of card you can play. And some of these draw power cards, especially like in 6 Sams, you get a free draw 2, and also it has a bunch of other searchers with it. That's just an example. 6 Sams is known for having some draw power and being able to search out cards with Xian's Dojo, Asceticism, along with Xian Smoke Signal, and you have a Rhoda, which is like 4 searchers right there. But Xian Smoke Signal has a parameter, it has to be a level 3 or lower, but it still makes your plays. But then there's cards like in Mermails, which we're going a little way back there, even though they kind of came back for a little bit. You had Moray of Greed, which some people played, some didn't. Some people did play it along with other draw power cards, especially way back. People would play like 2 pot of Pot of Duality. They play like 2 pot of Duality because back then Special Summon wasn't as big. I'm talking like when Mermails came out, and then they'd play like 2 or 3 Moray of Greed to like really cut down on their deck, because Moray of Greed is just, it's not a +1 or anything, it's just a +0. You don't gain or lose anything, you just thin out your deck. Well, if you're trying to get to your main plays and you can play Moray of Greed, that's fucking awesome. I'd rather have that than a searcher if I can just thin out my deck. And Mermails had searching cards too with it, so what is better at that point? Would you rather have some searching with withdrawing, or would you have rather a deck that doesn't have any of its own draw cards and it's just searching, and you have to use things like Pot of Desires or something along those lines to get the cards that you want? What's better? So I was trying to answer this question, and I can't come down to it because I'm not a competitive player. I've been out of the game. I cannot really have an opinion on what I think would be better in that scenario. And that's kind of what I want you guys to know. I want you to tell me what is your opinion about it. But I'll say that again later. But what my opinion is, I prefer having a searcher type card with drawing capabilities, because drawing capabilities can maybe draw you other cards that might not be key. A lot of these searcher cards either have you be able to bring a spell or a monster card. Where drawing, you have the ability to bring cards that are not archetype specific, but are helpful, or bring into a monster or spell, or need a trap card, or anything along those lines to make a play. And if you already have a searcher type thing, and be able to thin out your deck, I feel like it's better, because sometimes searching might get you a specific card, but like the parameters around it, like I said, I'm not for one or the other, which is better. Some decks have a combination of all. They'll have tons of searchers and draw power to some degree. A good example for that, even though the deck's not as competitive because the monster effects aren't as good as they used to be, but like Dark Worlds and Lightsworn, Dark and Light, they both have a lot of drawing and searching capability. You have Charge of the Light Brigade, Solar Recharge, and then you can play your actual Lightsworn cards that can help you get Lightsworn monsters as well, and then you have like Lumina that can they don't really search out, but with all your other cards, you have a lot of draw power, where Dark Worlds has Gates, Dark World Dealings, Drag Down, Allure, and Huntsman effect and all that, and where you can just keep your drawing cards, and you can also search off of Snow. So there you have a good searching ability plus drawing, same with 6 Sams. but then there's some that have one or the other. So what do you think is better? I think it's better to have more draw power with a card that can be able to search than having a deck that just searches. And this might all sound confusing, kind of stupid, but if you really think about it, there are decks that do it in different ways. One, because Konami has to keep it, interesting, so they have to kind of change around how they do it. But it's interesting to see which decks top and see how they handle their archetypes consistency. Because that's what it all comes down to, is your deck consistency. So how does each one handle it? And I feel like having a deck that can search out but draw more is kind of better than one that just searches out. But that's just me. Let me know down below and give some examples, because I actually want to hear about this. It was something that just popped in my mind at work, so... yeah...
Damn. Yeah.